Okay, so for that I have opened Visual Studio and we are going to select ASP.NET Core Web API. Clicking on next over here. And what I am doing is in this particular location where we had created our Angular project, I'm going to create the Web API project as well. I want to give it a name. So it could be HOC Gadget Shop API. Next. And now what I want to do is just keep the selected options as such and click on create. So it's created the project for me and opened the solution. Over here we see the files also that are created under the controller folder. This is the default controllers file that is coming. What we are going to do, we are going to add our controller file, and that is going to be an API controller. So I'm right clicking on the controllers folder, click on add and add a controller over here. So from the template we are going to select the API and we are going to select empty API controller over here. I click on add and now I should be giving the name of the controller as well. So over here it would be inventory controller. Clicking on add. So here I have the file created, and what we want to do is add a function over here. What that function will do, it is going to be an function which will accept the request from the Angular project. So from the front end the request will come with the inventory details and this particular function will process it. So it should be returning the action result. It's going to be index, or let's have it save inventory data. That could be the name of the function. And this is going to be an HTTP post request, so I'll give the attribute as such, and let me just add a return statement, otherwise the syntax error would keep on coming over here. It's going to return okay, inventory details saved successfully. So the basic purpose of this particular function is to process the web request that is coming from the Angular application. Now for that we'll have to create a SQL connection in this function, because the method is going to save the inventory data into the database table through a stored procedure. For that we'll be creating a SQL connection over here. We are getting a syntax error. I'll just import the required libraries. It's going to install the NuGet package automatically. And now in the SQL connection, we can also mention the connection string here only while initializing. So I'm giving the connection string over here. And I already have the value. I can give it over here. Okay. So after this, what we want to do is just log into our DB. Why I'm doing that before is because I want to be ready with my table and stored procedure before I make a call from the dotnet to the database. Now over here we have our databases, and gadget shop database is the one that we are going to use for our application. Let's create a new table in this database. I'm just opening a new query. And we'll give the command create table. It could be inventory table with all the fields that we are sending from the front end. Product ID, giving it integer data type. Then we can have product name, and it could obviously be a varchar. The reason is that we'll be passing some string value from the front end. Although we are passing it as a drop down index, but yes, we should be saving it as a string only, because the name will justify the data type over here. And the reorder point would be int again, and we also had available quantity. Okay, so these are going to be the fields, and we can also have an index kind of field, which will be identity, integer of course, and it could be a primary key, so that it is never null and always having a unique value. We'll create the table, and now we can also create a stored procedure. What we want to do is we want to save the data, and we can give it exact name that we have over here for the functionality, sp underscore save inventory data. So this is the kind of nomenclature that I follow to define a stored procedure. And what parameters it will take is, it's going to take these parameters, and we know that when we are passing a parameter or it is a variable, we are defining a variable in the stored procedure, we'll be giving it @ prefix and then giving the name. So this is the parameter that we are using. Basically 4 parameters. These are the parameters that we are using. And what we want to do is just take the parameters and save it in the table. Going to give the column names that we are saving into. So we have written a insert statement, mentioned the column names, and then we'll give the values that we are inserting. What are the values? Over here we have these parameters. So it's going to insert a single row in the table, because we are not inserting multiple rows at the same time. We're just passing single rows and entering over here in the table. And I think I have to add a parenthesis. Yes, so it should work fine. So you might be seeing that there is a syntax error that it is giving. It says that invalid object name. The reason is because currently the database is not refreshed. I have just created the table and then opened the window for the SQL editor to create a stored procedure. So the database is not refreshed as such. If I open it again, it would work fine if I make a connection to the DB server again. But I'll just execute this particular stored procedure. If it says successfully completed or executed the command, it's working all fine and there is no error in the stored procedure. Otherwise, we'll see if you're getting an error. So I'll just execute it. Okay, so command completed successfully. That means the stored procedure is created successfully and all is working fine. There is no error as such. So you could also face this issue that you have already created the table, but it's still saying the object is invalid in the DB, but not to worry. It might take some time. It doesn't take some time to refresh. You have to make the connection again and then it works properly fine. If the next time you're opening the SQL Server Management Studio again, it will not show any error as such. Okay, so let me just go to the .NET code, and over here we have already defined the connection string. Now the next step is to define the SQL command. We've already mentioned the SQL connection. Now we're going to give the SQL command. And how we're going to do it? We have to mention the command text. It's going to be the stored procedure name. Then we have to give the command type. Command type dot stored procedure, and give the SQL connection as well. It's connection here, and then take the variable that we have already defined. Now for the command text, we'll have to give the stored procedure name, exact stored procedure name that we have over here, and mention it in the string. So now this is completed. After this, what we'll be doing is opening the connection. So let me just open the connection. Let me execute the command now. It's going to be an execute non-query because we are not performing any retrieval from the database right now. We are just inserting the data. And we also have to make sure that we are closing the connection, because that is very important. It's connection dot close. Now this is all fine. We have mentioned the command text, we have opened the correct connection, and we have executed our stored procedure, and we have closed the connection. But the main task was to pass the request to the database. Now for taking the request, we'll have to create a model that is passed to this function from the front end. Like we had created a data structure in the JSON format on the Angular application, the same way we'll have to define a class in this application also that will accept the request through this function. So let me just add a folder in the solution, and we'll give it the name models. Over here I can add a class. It is going to be inventory. Okay, it just got loaded. Inventory request DTO. So this is what we are giving the name to our model. Now we have this class, and we can give the properties over here. What parameters will be passed through this class? First is going to be product ID. Second is going to be product name. So it's the benefit of having IntelliSense because it's giving you suggestions as well. Now we don't have product type, but we have available quantity. So that is the name that we are giving. And then we have reorder point. Okay, so let me just mention this last property, and now we can use this class. I'm saving it. We can do a save all and use this class in the request. Okay, so for this also we have to import this library. Now we have to pass it to the SP as well. So let me just add it to the parameters of the SP. Now here in this function, we have to mention the name of the parameter and then give the value that we are trying to pass. So first is the product ID. This is the value that we are trying to pass to this parameter. And then we have three other parameters as well. Product name, available quantity, and reorder point. So the reorder point was this. Yes, just confirming that the names are matching exactly with our stored procedure, because if they don't match, we'll get an error while executing the function. So let me just save all of it. Now we'll just run the application to check if the web API is working fine. I'll just close this dialog box because currently we're not setting up SSL certificate. We just want it to run on the local. Okay, so the application is running now, and over here we see the web API that we have created. This was the default that was given by the .NET Core, and now we have this function as well. This is a post method, and over here it's taking these parameters. We can try it out also. What I'll do is I'll just give some random values over here. And give values for all the parameters and click on execute. $200 is the success response code, and that is what we are getting. The body has the custom message that we had given in the function, so it's all working absolutely fine. By executing it, we can see that. But how can we make sure that it is working absolutely fine? We have to go to this particular table and check if the data that we had passed from the request, is it saved or not in the table, because that is the whole motive over here, to save the data into this particular table through the store procedure by making the connection from .NET Core. I click on execute, and over here we see one row is successfully inserted into the table. So we have made the connection from the .NET Core to the database. Now the next step is to make the connection from the Angular application to the .NET Core web API.